Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett. And I guess I might as well station retrograde because everybody else has. Mercury is retrograde, Venus is retrograde, Jupiter, Saturn are retrograde, Neptune's retrograde now, just joined the crew, Pluto is retrograde. So what's going to happen? Are we going to explode? Is the world going to come to a stop and start moving backwards? Probably not. There's a lot of superstition that is linked to retrograde planets, and I feel that it's tied to the truth that in the older cosmology, not the oldest cosmology, but for a long time, we believed that Earth was the center of the scene. And in a geocosmic or Earth-centered cosmology, it's basically impossible to understand why planets will slow down and stop and start moving backwards through the signs and constellations, moving retrograde. All sorts of mathematical models were introduced to try to come to terms with this mystery, and none of them worked. And you know, here's the deal. When we are playing in mental space, nothing is more terrifying than something we cannot figure out, right? Like if I cannot solve the problem, then the mind is just going to get shattered and bring the heart into its painful spaces along with it, yeah? So, I mean, first of all, let's just reflect on that, because in our times now, there's a lot to worry about. There's a lot of question marks. We don't know where these things are going, right? And I think that's a really important thing for us to honor, to hold, to contribute our energy to this movement of transformation. And part of this has to rely on faith that if we are operating from a place of honor and good heart, then light will show the way. I will say that every revolution should be seated in revelation. We should have the vision, right, of what the better world looks like and then create it, rather than just seeking to destroy the one that doesn't work, hoping that because it must be the worst, something better will take its place. Like, that's the story of every revolution ever. And it's not typically a pretty picture on the other side. So revelation before revolution, that does not mean that we have to have the answer to the riddle, right? Because the riddle is consistently being asked, right? Like there's no way out of the maze because the labyrinth itself is being built as we are moving through it. That I think much more elegantly said by the great Philip K. Dick. You know, like there's literally no way out of this maze because it's constructed as we are in it. That's the beauty of the Earth game. I use that term reluctantly because I don't want to say that there's not magic in the mundane and that this real world isn't real. It matters. Matter matters, you know. But we also, I think, if we allow ourselves more of a playful spirit for our journey, if we release the need to know, we can know so much more. Because if we stop trying to figure out what it looks like there in the future, or astrologically, is it because it was like this in the past, it has to be like that in the future? All these things, astrology is a way out. We want astrology as a way in. We want to bring that into the present moment and experience more of the now. And this is one of the energetic gifts, perhaps, of retrograde planet stations, you know, and movement. So for me, I mean, when we came into a heliocentric or sun-centered cosmology, so much of the retrograde superstition should have been burned away, right? Because we literally solved the problem. Right now that we know that the sun is the center of this racetrack that we're all on, and that, well, Earth is faster than Neptune, you know, just like passing a car on the highway, right? We know that car is going forward, but we're going forward faster. And for that time, it appears as if that other car is moving backwards, though they are moving forward. It's this amazing optical illusion that we've all experienced. You can do this walking, by the way. It's more effective at high velocities. If you really want to get into a study of it, I suggest you be the passenger of the car, not the driver, but you will find interesting things like the further away the car that you're passing is, like if it's a few lanes over, it's going to move retrograde for a longer period of time. You'll notice that it's when your car is about sextile, like at a 60-degree angle to that car, and on the other side, sextile or 60 degrees from that car, like that's the period of it moving backwards. It's much safer to do that kind of experience with another friend just walking. You don't even have to walk in circles, right? You can walk in lines, but you can walk in circles. And so for outer planet retrogrades, it's literally that. It's literally the same optical illusion we experience when we pass a car on the highway. And that sextile to sextile thing, right? Who's the car that we're in? It's called Earth, you know? So it's interesting, but the way that the Earth engages with the planet, right? We're in geocentric or Earth-centered charts. That's reflected by the sun in what would be called a complementary angle. So let me break that down. Basically speaking, generally speaking, right? Generally speaking, a outer planet, and what does that mean? Everything outside of Earth's orbital path. So that's Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the beings further out, right? Haumea, Maki, also the centaurs, asteroids, like everything except for the interior decorators who are Mercury and Venus, and the moon, who does just her own thing. Moon is queen, you know, we can't hold her to the dance that the other planets perform. But every outer planet, everything except for Mercury and Venus, retrogrades because Earth is passing them by. And the general rule is this: when the sun is at the opening trine of the cycle, the planet stations retrograde. So now we have the sun in Cancer, water sign. We should know that trines connect signs of the same elements, yeah? So Neptune is in Pisces. Now with the sun in Cancer, Neptune stations retrograde. When will Neptune station direct? When the sun's in Scorpio, right? So when the sun is on the opening trine of the cycle, and that for an outer planet, let's just use Neptune. Neptune's the most recent one to join the fold. Neptune's in Pisces. So the opening trine is when the sun gets from Pisces, the conjunction with Neptune, to the next water sign, which is Cancer, right? That's Neptune station retrograde. Neptune will be in the middle of its retrograde period when the sun is opposite Neptune. Neptune's in Pisces, that's the sun in Virgo. And then Neptune will station direct when the sun's in the closing trine of the cycle, same element, that's the sun in Scorpio, right? Sun will conjoin Neptune in Pisces, Neptune retrograde, sun in Cancer, middle of Neptune's retrograde, sun in Virgo, Neptune station direct, sun in Scorpio. Like that. And generally speaking, the planet stations when the sun's at the trines, okay? Different for Mercury and Venus, for sure. Okay, so let me say this about Neptune and Pluto, at least. Uranus kind of fits in. And I mean, Saturn and Jupiter too, almost. But Neptune and Pluto, they move so slowly that for the sun to get, like, for example, to Cancer and Scorpio, and then back to Pisces to meet Neptune, or for the sake of Pluto and Capricorn, for the sun to get to Taurus, Pluto station retrograde in Capricorn, sun to get to Virgo, Pluto station direct in Capricorn, this trines, right? Like Pluto just hasn't gone far in a year, in the time that the sun meets Pluto. So Pluto's basically retrograde for as long as it takes for sun to get from Taurus to Virgo. That's 4 months. Right? Actually, Pluto's retrograde for longer than that because, again, this trine thing, it's a very general trip. And the further away the planet, the further it gets towards a quincunx. And now I'm getting way too technical. But here's the trip. Pluto and Neptune, they're retrograde for almost half a year. So should we trip about that? I mean, probably not. Astrology, especially traditional astrology, you'll find more and more in your study. It's really about when things change, when they stop and turn around. The solstice just happened, right? The sun literally, having moved 6 months north, is now stopping, solstice, turn around, tropicos, and heading 6 months south. It's a big deal, right? At the equinox points, the sun changes from northern to southern declination or southern to northern declination. It's a shift, right? When the planet moves from evening star to morning star, just turnings, changings. That's like what our craft is built upon. So when a planet stations retrograde, it's a huge energy. It's literally called phasis or stasis. It's like it's said that that planetary energy is going to just kind of saturate, and that's a great word for Neptune, right? Saturate the chart. I like had a little water flood last night, and I thought it was way little, more little than it was. Actually, I came downstairs this morning. It was like, oh my gosh, like everything is covered in this water anyway. So it was a really interesting experience with Neptune having recently stationed and the saturation, and it just says more water in our lives, okay? Well, that'd be one thing if it was just Neptune. But it's Neptune joining the fold of many planets that are already retrograde. Yeah, if you use 10 planets, as many astrologers do, right? So, Sun, the Moon, who can never retrograde, you're left with 8 candidates: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, who can. And 6 out of 8 of those are retrograde right now, right? And so that's a huge deal, right? And so what does it ask for us? So first of all, release some of the superstition. I should, I guess, talk about why inner planets retrograde. Let's say this teacup is Mercury, and that you're the Earth and my face is the sun. So Mercury is just orbiting the sun, right? And notice that, like here, Mercury's moving from the plant to the star. We'll call that the direct zodiac order. Well, when Mercury passes you by, it looks like Mercury's moving the other way from the star to the plant. Actually, you'll see it looks halfway plant to the star and halfway star to plant unless it's moving right towards you. And that's how our experience would be. The planets would be retrograde half the time and direct half the time if we were standing still. We're not, you know? We're in a car in this chariot race. We're on the earth, right? So, but importantly, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, that's those planets passing Earth by. So we will have Mercury cazimi here in a short time. And that literally is Mercury between Earth and Sun, right? And importantly, remember, we're talking about Neptune retrograde, Pluto retrograde, Saturn, Jupiter retrograde. That's all happening because Earth is passing them by. Well, when are you closest to them? When you're passing them by. So regardless of whether it's an interior decorator of Mercury and Venus, who station retrograde or appear to move backwards through the signs and the constellations when they pass Earth, or if it's the outer planet, everybody else, who appear to move retrograde when Earth passes them. Retrograde planet means closest to Earth. For Mercury and Venus, it was June 3rd for Venus, Earth, Venus, Sun, right? The middle of Venus is 40 days and 40 nights of retrograde travel. Mercury's about 3 weeks, 3 times a year, thrice great Hermes, right? So in the middle of the retrograde periods for Mercury and Venus, it's the retrograde Mercury or retrograde Venus conjoined Sun. That's as close as they get to Earth, generally speaking, right? For the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, and beyond, it is when the middle of their retrograde is when in our charts, the sun is opposite that planet, okay? And that's when they are closest to us. So one thing I would love for you to integrate, like astronomically, into your understanding of retrogradation is this means the planets are close to Earth, or Earth is close to the planets, right? So more of that energy, yeah? So how can you get closer to Neptune? Well, it's begun, yeah? And look, when the sun is in Virgo opposite Neptune will be in that middle. That's when the Earth is closest to Neptune. But feel into that, right? Bring that energy to you. Now, let's talk about the truth that though this is an optical illusion for earthlings, that the planets are moving backwards, it's happening. We see them moving backwards. So whether you want to say, well, that's just an illusion or not, it doesn't matter. It's our experience. And what does that backwards motion ask of us? Bring it back. Go back to the old ways. Look back into your old places. I said this yesterday in a really important way. We use the different transit as the vehicle to get there, but this is what's inspiring it. Put your hand on your heart. Look at where you were 4 years ago and see how much you've grown. Look at where you were 4 generations ago and see how much you've grown. Look back there and see if there's some purifying and some cleaning up to do. Of course there is, right? From 4 years, from 4 generations, from 40 generations, from 40 lifetimes, whatever it wants to be, it is in a bit, it's about looking back. Are you going to do that out here? I mean, it can be a little bit looking through the pictures and stuff, especially now that Neptune's joined the scene, looking into the film, y'all. But most of this is going to be done by looking within. And that's a thing about retrograde planets that kind of bring that attention here. The world outside is going to start getting a little more foggy and crazy, and because it says the answers aren't there, the answers are here. So while we stay engaged in the world without, let's honor that as a reflection of the world within, and let's go within to go without, and vice versa. Okay. Another thing I'll say is this: the truth is every sign is a reaction to the sign that precedes it, right? Like an example I'll just use so we can move along quickly because I'm now late, is that, if Pisces had its way, we would never incarnate. It's about the oneness. And Aries has to react by saying, it's about one thee. Who am I? What's my mountain to climb? What is a Brett? And we could go on and on like that. So we'll see this, and if you listen to my Cancer New Moon Forecast and Astrology Hub this month, then I was really planting a lot of seeds of this idea of Aries. I got to know who I am. Taurus, I have to know what my needs are so I can receive my food for this mission that I'm on. Gemini, I have to be able to communicate my needs for them to be received so I can be fed and feel safe and alive and connect to the dream. And that's Cancer. That's that shelter place, right? So healthy Gemini helps me Cancer. Well, the retrograde motion, which is consistently danced by Sun, Moon, and Earth. Sun, Moon, and Earth never retrograde, but their nodes, where those points are one, the heart, the Apollo's arrow through the heart of Earth, and the paths of Moon and Sun, the lunar nodes, they move retrograde most of the time, right? So, and they also invoke in their 18-and-a-half-year course retrograde about the Zodiac, the great year of about 26,000 years, and we are in an amazing place of that motion. Right, which brings us from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, then to the age of Capricorn. And this thing that we typically think of as backwards through the zodiac, because Capricorn rises before Aquarius, before Pisces, because the sun moves through Capricorn and then Aquarius and then Pisces, right? There's a truth that supports why we consider the zodiacal order, right? But now we have this chance to move retrograde. So with Mercury retrograde in Cancer, well, how do we have to have a solid Cancer foundation to get to Gemini? And Mercury won't go back there, but you see he's looking back towards that sign, and it's okay to say back, right? So that's a beautiful contemplation, right? If being able to communicate my needs in the language of the other ears, Gemini, helps me receive and come into shelter and safety, Cancer. Well, what is the truth that being in safety and shelter, Cancer, helps me communicate my needs, right? Which is simply, hi, honey, what can I do for you? You know what I mean? And like allowing us to be held in that space. So how does, and it's not like Neptune's going to go back to Aquarius, but I'll say this, Aquarius is the reaction to Capricorn because Capricorn traditions necessitate a revolution, right? But when we revolt against these old traditions, right, the Pisces reaction is, hey, why are you hating people outside of you? They are you. We are one. So how does that oneness, Pisces, help us with the revolution, Aquarius? That's one question I'll say that this current Neptune retrogradation is adding to the mix. Remember that the purpose of this thing is for unity. Do not allow a revolution based upon the revelation of unity to further separate you. Please. Thanks for coming together with me for a little bit. Love and planets, friends. I will see you in space.